A father driving, finding an unexpected discovery. A mother cat and her kittens abandoned on the train tracks. A desperate rescue in the face of impending danger. A single act of compassion that will change their lives forever. The morning was tranquil, bathed in the gentle warmth of the rising sun. Fields stretched out in every direction, their green expanses broken only by the distant rise of a barn and the soft flow of a meandering creek. Birds chirped softly, their songs interspersed with the occasional rustle of wind through the high grass. It was a peaceful scene, a quintessential rural morning where time seemed to stand still and the world felt safe and unhurried. Yet even in such a serene landscape, not everything was at ease. Tied cruelly to the steel rails of a distant train track lay a calico cat and her three fragile kittens. The mother, a small patched cat of oranges, whites, and grays, trembled violently, her fur ruffled by the breeze but clinging tightly to the earth beneath her. The kittens, barely more than a few weeks old, were nestled against her, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. Their tiny bodies shivered, their cries sharp and fragile, an unnatural sound in the otherwise peaceful morning. The mother's movements were frantic but futile. She pawed at the ropes that bound her, a desperate effort to loosen the knots that held her in place. But the ropes were tied tightly, too tightly for her to break free. Her eyes flicked back and forth, her pupils dilated in panic as the kittens mewed in unison, sensing the looming danger but unable to comprehend it. The tracks ahead of them were empty now, but the calico knew that the silence was only temporary. The roar of the approaching train would soon pierce the calm, and she had only moments left. The mother's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a drum of dread. She let out a pitiful cry, a final plea to the heavens or to anyone who could hear, hoping for a miracle. Her paws scrabbled uselessly against the ropes again, her claws clicking on the cold metal ties. But the bonds only tightened with each frantic motion. The kittens' cries grew louder, their voices intertwining in a symphony of distress that seemed to make the whole world shudder. Above them, the sky was a pale blue canvas, and the sunlight seemed to shimmer gently over the landscape. But the air was thick with a growing sense of inevitability. The sound of the train's whistle broke the quiet, far off yet unmistakable. It was a shrill, mournful cry, a warning of what was coming. The cat's head jerked up at the sound, her body stiffening in terror. She could hear the train's rumble now, the distant thunder that was steadily growing louder. Every fiber of her being screamed to escape, but it was too late. The train was coming. Meanwhile, just a few miles away, Samuel Nelson was driving through the same rural countryside, the morning light slanting through the windshield of his aging sedan. The hum of the engine and the low swish of tires on the road were the only sounds in the quiet of the early hour. A former high school teacher, now in his early 40s, Samuel had become a familiar figure in the small town. His tall, broad-shouldered frame and graying hair spoke of years spent in the classroom, guiding students, imparting lessons that went beyond textbooks. But today, like every day for the past 3 years, his thoughts were not with his students or his teaching. They were on Stella, his daughter. His wife, Amelia, had passed away 3 years ago, and with her death, the life he once knew had crumbled. He had been a different man then, bright-eyed, full of hope, a loving husband and father. But the grief that followed Amelia's sudden illness had darkened him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The love he had for his wife was still there, buried deep within him, a part of him that had never truly healed. And in the wake of her passing, Samuel found himself in an unspoken war with his daughter. Stella, now 16, had pulled away from him in her own grief, a grief that had manifested as anger and resentment. She blamed him for not being there enough during her mother's illness, for not knowing how to fix things when everything fell apart. Their once easy conversations had dwindled into silence, their moments of shared laughter now lost in the gulf that had opened between them. Samuel had tried to bridge that gap, but no matter what he did, no matter how hard he tried, the distance between him and his daughter seemed to grow wider with each passing day. As Samuel drove, the road winding gently through the fields, he thought about their last conversation. He had tried to reach out to Stella the night before, offering to take her to dinner, to talk, but she had turned away, retreating to her room without a word. A wave of frustration washed over him, but he swallowed it down, focusing on the road ahead. He hadn't prayed in a long time, not since Amelia passed, but today, as he gripped the wheel, he whispered a prayer for wisdom.
Lord, help me understand her. Help me find the right words to show her I'm still here.
His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and for a moment, he thought he saw something moving. His pulse quickened. It wasn't unusual to see wildlife, but the shape ahead felt different. Lost in thoughts of Stella, he rounded a bend, but a soft, high-pitched mule broke his focus. The unnatural cry sent a shiver through him. He slowed down instinctively, squinting through the windshield, and then he saw it. The sight that met his eyes stopped him cold. There, at the edge of the tracks, was the calico cat. Her body was rigid with fear, her small form trembling against the ties. The three kittens were clustered around her, their tiny faces painted with terror. Samuel's heart lurched in his chest. He had no idea how they got there, but it was clear that they were in grave danger. The train was still some distance away, but the whistle was unmistakable, its sound sharpening as it drew nearer. There was no time to waste. Samuel's mind raced, but his body acted on instinct. He slammed the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt just off the side of the road. Without thinking, he threw open the door and bolted from the car, his shoes thumping against the gravel as he sprinted toward the tracks. As he ran, his heart hammered in his chest. There was no way he could let this happen, not while there was a chance to save them. His thoughts shifted away from Stella, away from his grief and frustration. For now, there was only one thing that mattered: the cat and her kittens. They were in danger, and Samuel had to act. The train approached rapidly, its whistle sharp and frantic. As Samuel rushed toward the tracks, panic rising in his chest. The calico cat's desperate cries urged him to hurry. As he neared, he saw the ropes binding her glow with an unnatural light, a sign of some unseen force guiding him. Trembling, Samuel realized this was more than a rescue. It was the start of something bigger. Kneeling, he managed to free the cat and gather the kittens, feeling the weight of the moment. As they huddled safely in his arms, the mother nuzzled him in gratitude, the soft purring filling the air. Samuel's chest tightened as the reality of what he had just done sank in. He had saved them, risking his own life, and somehow they had all made it. The train, now a blur in the distance, reminded him of how close it had all been. He exhaled, then looked at the cat, who was now grooming herself while her kittens nestled against her. Samuel smiled softly, feeling a quiet connection with her, a shared instinct to protect. Overwhelmed, he bowed his head, still holding the fragile lives in his arms, and whispered a steady prayer.
Thank you.
He murmured, his heart swelling with gratitude.
Thank you for giving me the strength to do this, for helping me save them.
As the words left his lips, Samuel felt a sense of peace settle over him. He didn't fully understand it, but there was something bigger than him at work here. It wasn't just about saving the kittens. It was about something deeper, something that reached into his soul. It was about the choice to act, the choice to not turn away, even when fear and doubt clouded everything. It was about purpose. And as he whispered another quiet prayer of thanks, Samuel felt a stirring in his heart, an affirmation that, for once, he had done something right. Carefully, Samuel rose to his feet, still holding the kittens gently against his chest. He glanced at the mother cat, who had cautiously moved a few steps away, but was still watching him, her amber eyes filled with trust. She was aware of what had happened, of the danger that had passed, and in her quiet way, she had offered him her thanks. He nodded at her, acknowledging the bond they had shared in those fleeting moments. With a final glance at the tracks, Samuel turned and headed back to his car. The kittens, now calm and quiet, were nestled against him, and he placed them gently on his lap as he slid into the driver's seat. The mother cat, once hesitant, now seemed content to sit in the back, watching Samuel with a quiet, trusting gaze. As he started the engine and began the slow drive home, Samuel was acutely aware of the fragility of the situation. The kittens were small, their bodies still delicate and unsteady. The mother cat had been through so much, her own strength and resilience evident in her protective instincts. He drove with caution, every turn and stop a reminder of how precious these lives were. The quiet, rhythmic purring of the cat in the back seat and the gentle warmth of the kittens in his lap grounded Samuel. There was an unexpected depth to this experience, one that went beyond the rescue. As he drove, he found himself reflecting not just on the act of saving them, but on what it meant for him. There was something in this moment that sparked a deeper connection to his faith, a renewed sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about being a teacher, a father, or a widower. In that moment, Samuel realized he had been given a chance to make a difference, to restore some measure of hope in a world that had often felt heavy with loss. The road ahead seemed long, but for the first time in a long while, Samuel didn't feel so alone. Samuel's house sat at the edge of a small, quiet neighborhood, nestled beneath towering trees that provided shade in the summer and stark beauty in the fall. The house itself was modest, a single-story structure with faded red brick and a front porch where Amelia had spent many afternoons, sipping lemonade and watching the world go by. Now, as Samuel parked the car in the driveway, the house felt like a symbol of everything he had lost and everything he still had to navigate. He sat still for a moment, his hands on the steering wheel, his eyes staring at the front door as if it were a distant horizon. The kitten's soft, almost imperceptible mewls from his lap brought him back to the present. He exhaled slowly and looked back at the rearview mirror, where the mother cat sat in the back seat, her eyes watching him intently, as if she were somehow in tune with the thoughts racing through his mind. He felt an overwhelming need to act quickly. These creatures, fragile, small, so dependent on him, needed immediate care, and Samuel's pulse quickened at the weight of responsibility. For a moment, it seemed as though the ordinary morning had dissolved, leaving behind only this new, extraordinary burden. The act of saving the cats, that last-minute decision to rush to their rescue, now seemed to carry deeper meaning than just a quick escape from tragedy. He had given them a second chance, and in doing so, he had been granted a moment of redemption for himself, a breath of air after years of holding his breath. The reality of the situation weighed on him. This wasn't just about caring for some stray animals. It was about responsibility, healing, and the possibility of a new beginning. Samuel's thoughts lingered on the significance of the moment, the frailty of the kittens, the way the mother cat had instinctively trusted him. All of it seemed to symbolize the fragile nature of life and the immense potential for change. The weight of this responsibility seemed overwhelming, but it also stirred something in him, a long dormant hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way forward. He turned off the car and got out, carefully holding the kittens in his arms as he made his way to the door. The mother cat padded behind him, tentative, but with quiet resolve. They entered the house together, and for a brief moment, Samuel allowed himself to believe that maybe the day could still offer something good, something beyond the loss and heartache that had become his daily existence. Inside, the house was cool and quiet. Samuel placed the kittens down gently on the old kitchen table, their tiny bodies trembling as they adjusted to the unfamiliar space. The mother cat followed, still cautious, but her trust in him seemed to grow with each passing second. Samuel quickly filled a shallow dish with water and placed it near the table. Then he made his way to the pantry, gathering some food for the cats. His hands moved automatically, yet his mind was alive with the realization of how much his life had changed in just a few short hours. A soft shuffle behind him made him turn, and he saw Stella standing in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest, eyes narrowed in suspicion.
What's this?
She asked, her sounding curious. Samuel hesitated, unsure how to explain the sudden shift in their home, how the presence of these small creatures had already begun to fill the empty space Amelia had left behind.
They need our help.
He said simply, his tone lacking the usual frustration that had marred their conversations. Stella frowned, glancing at the kittens and then back at her father.
Are we really going to keep them after everything that happened?
Samuel's stomach clenched, the shadow of their strained relationship still fresh in his mind.
No, we're just going to make sure they're okay for now.
Stella was silent for a moment, then, unexpectedly, she took a small step forward. Her gaze softened as she observed the kittens, their wide eyes watching her warily. One of them, the smallest of the three, gingerly stretched out a paw toward her, its tiny claws glinting in the sunlight. She knelt slowly, reaching out. At first she hesitated, but then, The kitten, sensing her gentleness, leaned into her touch. Stella's breath caught in her throat as she made contact with its soft fur. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, something shifted. The defensiveness that had always defined their interactions seemed to momentarily fade, replaced by a rare softness in her expression. Samuel watched from the corner of the room, feeling an unfamiliar warmth spreading through him. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, they were sharing a moment of connection, a brief and fragile bridge between the past and whatever future they might build together. He could see the uncertainty in Stella's eyes, but he also saw something else, a flicker of empathy, of care.
It's okay, Stella.
Samuel said quietly.
They've been through a lot. They just need some time.
Stella nodded, though her eyes remained on the kittens.
I know.
She murmured, as though she were speaking to herself as much as to her father. Over the next few days, the presence of the kittens seemed to draw Samuel and Stella closer together. Every morning, Samuel would check on them, making sure they had food and water. He'd offer gentle encouragement to the mother cat, and little by little, the fragile creatures began to adjust to their new home. The kittens, once timid and fearful, slowly became more comfortable, venturing out from their corner on the kitchen table to explore their surroundings. One afternoon, as Samuel sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, Stella joined him. She didn't speak at first, simply sitting beside him, but the warmth of the sun on their faces seemed to create an unspoken bond. They both watched the kittens playing in the yard, chasing after fallen leaves that the breeze had blown into their path. Samuel took a deep breath.
You're doing good with them.
He said after a moment, his voice soft but sincere. Stella glanced at him, her expression unreadable, but there was no edge in her tone when she responded.
I guess they're not so bad.
She said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. It was a small thing, a small moment of connection, but for Samuel it felt like a miracle. He could see his daughter beginning to soften, not just toward the kittens, but toward him as well. For the first time in years, there was a flicker of hope. Hope that maybe their relationship wasn't beyond repair. They weren't just father and daughter. They were two people who had both been hurt, both lost in their own way, but who could still find a path toward healing. But the fragile peace was disrupted one afternoon when Mrs. Wilson, an overly curious neighbor, stopped by. She was one of the many who had witnessed the initial incident with the kittens, and though she had offered nothing but judgment at the time, today she had a different tone.
Samuel,
She said, her voice low, almost conspiratorial.
I've heard things. Strange things. Some of the kids around here are saying that Stella and her friends had something to do with those kittens.
The words hit Samuel like a punch to the stomach. He hadn't wanted to believe it, but a part of him had known there was more to the story. Mrs. Wilson's eyes were filled with an uncomfortable mix of gossip and concern, but Samuel couldn't focus on her words. His mind raced. Stella appeared in the doorway, sensing the shift in the atmosphere.
What's going on?
She asked, a note of tension creeping into her voice. Before he could answer, Mrs. Wilson turned and walked away, leaving Samuel with the weight of the revelation pressing on him. Stella stood there, her gaze wary, but she didn't speak. She knew the conversation that was about to happen. The truth had come to light, and now Samuel would have to confront his daughter, not just as a father, but as someone seeking to understand her, to guide her, and perhaps to heal together. Samuel stood in the living room, feeling the weight of the situation as he watched the kittens play peacefully in the corner. Stella sat on the couch, tense and closed off. The revelation from Mrs. Wilson that Stella had been involved in tying the cats to the tracks hit Samuel hard. Despite his pain and frustration, he fought to stay calm. He knew his role was not to scold, but to guide Stella and the others through the mess they had created.
Stella, was it you who tied the cats to the tracks?
He began, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of his disappointment. Stella's eyes widened in shock, her expression a mixture of guilt and hesitation. It was clear she wanted to respond, but the words seemed to catch in her throat, leaving her silent.
You and your friends have done something serious. You tied those cats to the tracks. And while I know you didn't think about the consequences at the time, the reality is, you put those lives at risk. You need to understand the gravity of what you've done.
Stella's eyes flickered and she opened her mouth to protest, but Samuel raised his hand, asking for silence.
I'm not blaming you. Blame doesn't help anyone, but you need to take responsibility. This isn't about who's right or wrong, it's about owning up to the harm that was caused.
A long pause hung in the air, broken only by the soft sounds of the kittens mewing from the other room. Stella looked away, but Samuel could tell she was struggling internally. He softened his tone, trying to reach her.
What's important now is what you do next. You can't undo what's been done, but you can show that you understand the value of life, the importance of kindness. You can show it through your actions.
Stella shifted uncomfortably, but Samuel wasn't looking for easy answers. He wasn't looking for her to apologize in a forced, insincere way. This wasn't just about words. It was about a change in her heart.
I want you to do something.
Samuel continued, his voice firm but compassionate.
I want you to take responsibility, not just by saying sorry, but by showing it. You can start by caring for the cats, by making sure they're safe and healthy. That's how you can make amends. You have the power to change things, but it's going to take more than just words. It will take time and action.
There was silence again, but this time it was different. Stella's posture softened. Her arms unfolded slowly as though she was beginning to consider the weight of his words. After a long pause, she nodded slightly.
I'm sorry, Dad.
He said quietly, her voice tinged with both guilt and understanding.
I'll do it. I'll help with the cats.
Samuel nodded, a small sigh escaping him. This was the first step, the beginning of a long journey for both of them. He wasn't sure what it would look like, or how much change could happen in a single moment, but for now he allowed himself to believe that this was a beginning, a chance for healing. In the afternoon, Samuel invited Stella's friends, Isaac, Ava, and Dave, to the house, knowing they needed to be confronted too. The responsibility for the cruel prank couldn't fall solely on Stella. The teens arrived nervously, casting uneasy glances at the kittens. Isaac fidgeted with his hands in his pockets. Ava looked between Samuel and the cats, and Dave stood silently, arms folded. Samuel sat them down at the kitchen table, with Stella standing beside him, her guilt and embarrassment evident. He took a deep breath and began.
You all have a role in what happened with the cats,
He said, his voice even.
and I'm not here to lecture you about what you did wrong. What's done is done. What matters now is what you're going to do about it.
Isaac shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable.
Look, we didn't mean for anything bad to happen.
He said, his voice defensive.
It was just supposed to be a prank, nothing serious.
Ava chimed in, her tone hesitant.
We didn't think anyone would get hurt. We didn't think the cats would end up like that.
Samuel nodded, his expression calm but resolute.
I understand that you didn't mean to hurt anyone, but the truth is you put those animals in danger, you tied them up, you left them vulnerable, and you have to understand that actions like that don't just disappear, they have consequences.
Dave, who had been silent until now, spoke up.
We didn't think it would go that far.
He said quietly, his voice tinged with guilt.
We were just trying to mess around. I didn't realize how serious it could get.
Samuel let the silence linger for a moment.
This isn't about pointing fingers or justifying your actions. It's about understanding what you've done, acknowledging it, and taking responsibility for it.
The group grew quieter as Samuel's words settled in. He could see them processing the weight of the situation. There was no easy way out of this. No quick excuse or apology would be enough to fix what had been done. But Samuel wasn't expecting perfection. He was expecting change, growth.
I'm not going to tell you how to feel or what to think,
Samuel continued.
but I do want you to understand one thing. You can make a difference now. You can show that you understand what's at stake here by caring for these cats, by taking responsibility for your actions.
The teens exchanged uncertain glances, but it was clear that Samuel's approach had hit home. They weren't used to being held accountable in this way, used to skating by on excuses or blame shifting. But in this moment, they were faced with a choice. Samuel's calm, steady guidance had planted a seed of reflection in them, a seed that would need time to take root. But he had given them the chance to learn, to make things right, and that was all he could do. After the meeting, Stella seemed quieter than usual. As the teens left, she stayed behind, sitting at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the edge of a napkin. Samuel joined her, sitting across from her, waiting for her to speak. Stella took a deep breath before looking up at him.
Dad, I never thought it would go that far. I didn't think about what could have happened. I just wanted to make everyone laugh, to fit in.
Samuel's heart ached as he saw the vulnerability in his daughter's eyes. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an honest admission. For the first time, Stella seemed to understand the seriousness of their actions. She had seen the potential consequences, and the weight of it was finally settling in.
Stella,
Samuel said gently.
I know it's hard to face what happened, but I'm proud of you for owning up to it. It's not easy, but you're doing the right thing.
She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping again.
I don't know if I can make up for what we did, but I want to try.
Samuel smiled softly.
We can't undo what's already happened, but we can learn from it and make things better moving forward.
Over the next few days, the teens returned, not just to care for the cats, but to reflect on their actions and what it meant to take responsibility. At first, there was reluctance. Isaac, Ava, and Dave still carried the weight of their guilt, while Stella wrestled with her own sense of regret. But as they spent time with the kittens, their connection to the animals deepened. They saw how fragile life could be, how small actions could ripple outward, affecting far more than they had realized. And in caring for the kittens, they began to change. Not just their behavior, but their hearts. It was a slow, quiet transformation, but it was there. Samuel watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. He knew that the road to redemption wasn't easy, but this was a start. This was the beginning of something more than just forgiveness. It was the start of healing, of understanding, and of a deeper connection to each other. The road ahead would be long, but they were walking it together. The transformation after the rescue unfolded gradually. At first, the teens' actions seemed more like penance than change, but over time, something shifted. Isaac, Ava, Dave, and Stella each found their own way to connect with the cats, revealing new strengths and vulnerabilities. Isaac, full of energy, initially struggled with responsibility, spending his days making toys for the kittens. Though others saw it as distraction, Samuel saw it as Isaac's attempt to contribute meaningfully, channeling his restless energy into bringing the kittens joy. Ava, drawn to the mother cat, found a quiet, patient side of herself as she cared for the calico. Her confidence grew as she took pride in the cat's well-being. Dave, quiet and withdrawn, bonded with a timid kitten. His silent care, feeding, cleaning, and simply sitting with it, revealed a strength that mirrored Samuel's need for understanding. Stella, initially reluctant, became a natural leader. Organizing tasks and guiding the group, she showed maturity and compassion, growing in her ability to lead with care. Watching the teens evolve, Samuel's heart swelled with a quiet pride. This wasn't just about saving the kittens anymore. It was about saving each other. His faith in second chances had been restored, and as he watched the teens move through their own transformations, he silently thanked God for guiding them through this journey. Each day they were healing in different ways. Each day the future seemed just a little bit brighter. One evening, as the teens interacted with the cats in the backyard, Samuel sat on the porch, reflecting on the changes he had witnessed. The soft sounds of the kittens playing, combined with the laughter and chatter of the teens, filled the air with a sense of peace. In that moment, Samuel knew that the path to redemption wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. And he realized, with quiet gratitude, that they had all found their way to healing together. In the mornings, Samuel's home became a hub of activity. The teens arrived with renewed commitment, and their once reluctant approach to the task had transformed into a shared routine. They were no longer simply following orders. They were engaging with purpose. The mornings were filled with laughter and chatter as Samuel observed each of them carrying out their tasks with greater focus and care. The lesson of trust became central to the new rhythm. Samuel took the time to teach the teens how to earn the cat's trust, emphasizing the importance of patience. It wasn't just about feeding or cleaning. It was about creating an emotional bond. With each passing day, the teens began to understand that the cats needed more than just food. They needed attention, love, and respect. Samuel found that this lesson in trust wasn't one-sided. he had to earn their trust too. As the days passed, he observed the teens growing more comfortable in their roles, no longer seeing their responsibilities as punishment, but as an opportunity to build something better. He had no illusions that this would be the end of their struggles, but for the first time, Samuel saw real progress. He could feel the healing, and it wasn't just in the kittens. In the days that followed, each teen found a unique way to bond with the cats. Isaac, with his knack for creativity, began designing toys to keep the kittens engaged. It was his way of channeling his energy into something productive, and it allowed him to take pride in his contributions. Ava, whose confidence had always been shaky, found herself growing more comfortable and self-assured as she continued to care for the calico cat. Her nurturing side, which had been dormant for so long, began to emerge, and she took genuine joy in watching the mother cat thrive. Dave, too, underwent a transformation. The kitten he bonded with was skittish at first, but over time, Dave's quiet presence calmed the little creature. It was a soft, patient connection that mirrored his own need for understanding. Dave's growth wasn't loud or obvious, but Samuel noticed the subtle shifts, the way Dave would engage with others more and express his thoughts more openly. Finally, Stella blossomed into a leader, organizing the group and guiding her friends with newfound maturity. The once distant relationship between her and her father had started to heal, and in caring for the kittens, she had found a sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of what it meant to lead with empathy. Samuel watched these changes unfold with gratitude and hope. As the backyard became a sanctuary of joy and healing, he was reminded of the power of kindness, how even the smallest acts could spark change, and how, through their care for the kittens, these teens were finding a path to redemption. In this small corner of the world, amidst the soft mews of the kittens and the laughter of the teens, Samuel saw the seeds of growth take root. What began as a mistake had blossomed into something beautiful. The power of kindness, patience, and responsibility was not just transforming the lives of the kittens, it was transforming the lives of the teens, and Samuel's own heart swelled with pride and gratitude. In the healing they had found together, he saw the promise of a brighter future, one where second chances could lead to redemption. Over time, the teens grew closer while caring for the calico cat and her kittens, learning valuable lessons about patience, responsibility, and compassion. Each teen found their role, and together they healed both the animals and their own emotional wounds. Samuel and Stella's relationship also improved as they shared the responsibility, leading to deeper conversations and a stronger bond between them. The experience allowed them all to reflect on their past mistakes and work toward redemption. Samuel, too, found healing in this process. His role as a father, once overshadowed by grief and a strained relationship with his daughter, became an opportunity for redemption. Through guiding the teens, particularly Stella, he saw how the smallest acts of care and compassion could create ripples of change, not just in the lives of others, but in his own heart as well. The quiet satisfaction that came from watching them grow was a gift that reminded him of the power of unconditional love. The teens' individual strengths had gradually come together, forming a cohesive team. Each day they worked in harmony, supporting one another and learning the value of collaboration. As they took turns caring for the cats, they forged a deeper connection with the animals and with one another. This newly forged unity extended beyond the backyard as well. In their shared responsibility, the teens began to see the value in teamwork, in lifting each other up, and in the small acts that demonstrated care. Samuel watched from the sidelines with a quiet sense of pride. He had seen the transformation not just in the teens, but in himself. His role had shifted from simply being a father to becoming a mentor, guiding these young people through their mistakes and teaching them how to rebuild their lives, one act of kindness at a time. Through this, he had rediscovered his own faith in second chances, and he had witnessed firsthand how redemption could unfold in even the most unexpected of ways. While the journey was far from over, Samuel recognized it as a turning point for everyone. The teens had learned valuable lessons, and Samuel's faith in their potential was renewed. Through their shared efforts, they proved that no matter how far someone strays, there is always a way back. Stella's transformation was evident as she became more self-aware and empathetic, and her relationship with her father shifted from tension to mutual respect. Their bond grew stronger, now built on shared values. For Samuel, the experience deepened his understanding of unconditional love, making his faith a guiding force in his role as a father. He learned that, even in the darkest moments, there is always room for growth and redemption. Together, Samuel and Stella had completed a journey, from anger, guilt, and resentment to understanding, forgiveness, and connection. This journey had not just healed them, but it had also changed them. Their story became a testament to the importance of kindness, second chances, and the transformative power of love. In the end, they were no longer just a father and daughter. They were a family united by shared experiences and by the unspoken bond of understanding that could only come from a journey like theirs.